All right. Hi, everybody. Just wanted to take some time to address the formative assessments that y'all turned in. First of all, I got a ton of great insight on how the class is going for most of you, everybody who turned it in, um, and some ideas about what's going well, and some ideas about what maybe could be improved, and then also some of the challenges of the class. And there are some things. A lot of things that are going well. So I got mostly positive feedback, and even I wouldn't even call the other stuff negative feedback. It's just critical thinking. Hey, what could be improved? And some people had some really good ideas about what could be improved. And so I wanted to look at those a little bit. And then also there's a couple of just challenging aspects of this class and the pacing of it that I don't think can be avoided, and they're just things that we're all in it together. It's Friday morning for me. I got up, at like 7 o'clock, got my kids to their school and everything, and then I'm thinking, God, it'd be nice to go out for a walk or go for a hike in the foothills or something. But then it's like, no, I got to get this stuff graded. People need the feedback in order for it to be useful at this moment. So I sat down and started working, and then once I got into the groove, I was like, okay, this is really interesting stuff, and it kind of re-energized my brain, even on a Friday morning, to try to get stuff done. So I think that that's a good lesson that we all could take into account for this class, is that sometimes it's a matter of just sitting down consistently and doing stuff, checking in every day. So let's talk about some of the specifics real quick that I wanted to address. It seems like people appreciate the detailed feedback that I give. You will notice over the course of the rest of the semester that on the discussion boards, I'll typically give a little bit less feedback than I have been giving, because everybody's starting to get into the groove and everybody's understanding what my expectations are, and people are posting really good things to a point where you're teaching each other, and you don't need me, or you don't need me as much. I will help to try to clarify as many things as possible, but you've all done the readings, you've all engaged in deep thinking about stuff, and things are really coming together. So you will be assets for each other, so that I can kind of take a little bit more of a background role of sorts. People seem to be really enjoying, in particular, the readings from Invisible Hands. There were a number of people who also said they really enjoyed the first few readings based on socialization and identity. And I wanted to talk about the difference between some of the readings at the very beginning of the class and the readings in Invisible Hands. They're very, very different styles. Invisible Hands, the readings are created so that they read like a story, and so they are much more readable. You can get through them a lot quicker. They're more enjoyable, at least in terms of keeping your interest. I don't know if they're enjoyable in terms of subject matter, because they deal with some pretty horrific stuff, but there's also some parts in it that are cause for hope. And I think that's the whole point. Right, so I hope that as you're looking at Invisible Hands, you start to feel that kind of like, wow, there's some serious problems out there, but there's people doing stuff about it. That's where we're headed, especially towards the end of the semester, when you're going to be doing the global, or end of the session, when you're going to be doing the global solutions essay. Well, how are people trying to solve some of these tough problems? Most people have said that the readings are eye-opening, and I think they're eye-opening in different ways. For example, Cycle of Socialization, and the one that you're getting into right now, 5 Faces of Oppression, the one about identity and privilege and disadvantage. Those are theoretical articles. Those are very complex. They have multiple layers. You will need to read them multiple times in order to understand them, and they are to be used as tools for processing large amounts of information, to try to break them down and analyze them into things that are a little more capsulized and a little more doable. So don't expect to read the theoretical stuff once and totally understand it. I've read the 5 Faces of Oppression probably 10 times now, and every time I read it, something new pops out of it. Same with the Cycle of Socialization. There's some new insight that I discover every time I read it, and I think that's a really important thing to think about if you're frustrated with trying to get through some of those difficult theoretical readings. they're just hard. That's what they are, and they're very academic. But what they do is they increase the level of understanding that you have of complex situations, and it'll help you give you lenses to read the Invisible Hands books with different details, right? You can read it with for the story, but you can also read it for like the idea of structural oppression. How does this idea of privilege and disadvantage come into play when people are talking about their experiences? So something else. People seem to be enjoying the scaffolded nature of the class, that like everything kind of builds to the next thing and builds to the next thing. And I think you'll see that come into play more as I bring back assignments where you'll have to look back at ideas about identity, or you have to look back at ideas about socialization, or you'll have to draw on some of the ethics readings in order to do the assignments. And that's by design, right? I've thought very carefully about how this class is constructed to make sure that things kind of lead to the next. Something else to keep in mind is that we've been focusing a lot on refugees lately. And so some people said in that, the whole class is about refugees, but it's not. It's about displacement. And we're looking at refugees in particular as a form of physical human displacement. However, as we get more into the diversity issues that we'll be talking about soon, you'll see something that is more along the lines of a metaphorical displacement or a psychological displacement. For example, a woman may feel displaced in a male-dominated sexist society, right? A gay man may feel displaced in a heterosexist society. A poor person may feel displaced in a classist society. A trans person may feel displaced in a heteronormative society. So that's something to start thinking about. The displacement is not just physical, although I think physical is the most obvious and probably the most dire form of displacement. Only a very, very close second is the idea of psychological displacement. And people who are displaced physically also deal with psychological displacement as well. And another word for that could be trauma, right? People face trauma based on their experiences. So some things that can be improved that you mentioned, more videos. So I'm doing more videos like this. Also, we're getting into a point in the class where there's going to be less reading. And there's going to be more doing. And so you'll be watching more videos. I have incorporated in a number of the modules some stand-up and sketch comedy, not my own, other people doing it, to help kind of liven things up a little bit. We're talking about pretty serious stuff, but I also want to show you how some people have approached very difficult topics like racism, like sexism, through the lens of comedy. And then something else, the idea of dialoguing on the discussion board. I constantly battle with myself about how I'm going to construct the discussions because, is it better to have 5-week-long discussions that people dive really deeply into, or is it better to have a bunch, like 13 discussions where we touch on a bunch of topics? And for this particular class, I decided that I wanted to make sure that we saw the breadth of the topics as opposed to the depth, right? This class is a class that's designed to kind of supplement other classes that you do later. And so while we do get pretty deep into some things, it's obvious that you could take an entire class on racism, or you could take an entire class on refugee studies, or you could take an entire class on sexism, and get much, much deeper. But that's not exactly the goal of this class. The goal is more of an introduction to some of those things. I've been working on trying to find the best structure for how to list assignments, and I'll be looking into trying to figure out for the next time I do this how to get like just one long list that people can kind of just check off. But the reason why I didn't really do that this time was because I was concerned that people might just click on the assignment and then do the assignment without doing the readings or stuff or anything like that. So I was a little concerned with that. But maybe if I've constructed the instructions for the assignment correctly, then people will go and find the reading materials where they need to. But just remember that the place to find all the things that are due are in those little tasks, discussions, and assignments folders within each module. I'm trying to give you modules a couple ahead so that you can kind of plan. But I do understand that it's kind of annoying to click through multiple ones of those to figure out everything that you need to do. Also, some people suggested, hey, maybe we should try doing a little more dialoguing on the discussion board, back and forth. So there will be a couple of discussions that are formatted a little bit differently later in the semester, to give you a little bit more flexibility, and also maybe you'll have a time to like really go back and forth with discussing things and responding to people. So I took that into account. Somebody recommended that. Somebody also mentioned that maybe I should have some reading quizzes and stuff, and I've thought about that, because I think they can be helpful, and they're really useful for some people. But I've found that more people get more out of having to try to analyze information that they get and then synthesize it into a reading. Whereas if you're just taking a quiz, as opposed to doing a discussion or an assignment, you don't get to fully process the information in a way that I think is more beneficial in the long run. But we'll see. I might. We're not going to have any quizzes during this class, but I'll think about it for future classes. So, let's see. Is there anything else in my little notes here that I didn't mention? Something to consider too is the idea of community building. I spend a lot of time in my face-to-face classes getting people talking to each other and talking about things, and that's kind of what the discussion board does on here. But just because of the nature of the class and the fact that we don't see each other in person, there's always going to be that little bit of distance. So something that I would encourage you to do on the discussion board is to continue to try to do that back and forth a little bit. Right, if somebody's posted 5 or 6 times on a discussion board when the only requirement is to post 4 times, I look at that and go, okay, this person went the extra mile. That's outstanding work as opposed to just good work, which could tip the balance on a couple of points here and there, between like a B plus and an A minus or something like that. So keep that in mind. And then let's see, what's the last thing I wanted to talk about? In terms of the structure of the class and having one module end on one day and then you start the next one on the same day, my only other option for that was to have due dates every day. So if you're getting a little bogged down in the idea of, okay, I'm ending this module, I'm doing the responses for my classmates, and now I have to start a new one. Oh, this is exhausting. Maybe think about on a Tuesday, say, okay, this is when my responses to classmates are actually due, so I don't have to do them on Wednesday when the initial post for the next discussion is due. So if you think of it as module starts on Monday, ends on Tuesday, and then the next one starts on Wednesday, ends on Thursday, that might help structure it in your mind a little bit better. But I wanted to create that flexibility a little bit so you didn't have to turn something in every single day, so that you could kind of do every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So keep that in mind. That's about all I have to say about that. Again, thank you for the useful feedback. It's always a good exercise for me to see what people are latching onto and what I can improve for the class the next time around to make it better for students who take it in the future. So I appreciate that a lot. Sorry this video is a little bit longer than normal, but it is kind of the mid-semester, if you want to think of this as a semester, right? The mid-semester, mid-class wrap-up where I'm looking at all the stuff that you've done and then trying to make some comments on that. So that's all I have to say at the moment, and I hope everyone has a productive weekend. I say productive because I know sometimes it's not going to be good because you have a lot of work to do. And also, don't forget, if you're not pleased or satisfied with your Code of Ethics analysis essay score, you can rewrite that within a week using the rubric, using my feedback to improve it, and you can replace the grade for that And so I highly recommend for a lot of you to take advantage of that opportunity. That's it. Talk to you later.